for the Philippines. I thank you for your time, and what I want to know for my viewers. Just tell what your basic platform is. Introduce yourself, and then we will just take it naturally. A short interview. I don't want to be here of what your goal is as an attorney and a future senator. What is your goal to help the people of your country?
Actually, sir, I started when I first ran as congressman in 2007. That was manual elections. And because it's manual, then the cheating procedure would also have to be manual. And being manual, it is susceptible to perception, observation, and interdiction. So if you know all these things, then you will be able to protect yourself fairly well. And that's exactly what I did. I was able to protect myself from being cheated, and I handily won the elections in 2007, even though I was not known to the people. I was virtually a nobody, and I just put up a ragtag team of political neophytes. But by bringing our message loud and clear and in a manner that people will understand, we won the elections handily. I won as congressman. I was able to bring with me 3 of my mayors out of 8. They won as well. 4 vice mayors out of 8, and 1/2 of all the local councillors in the province of Biliran, comprising of 8 municipalities. So basically, the political landscape in Biliran was changed from a political dynasty controlling everything to a political landscape where 2 major groups are competing with each other. So I used that political scenario to create the best condition for people to prosper. As a matter of fact, when I started in 2007, poverty incidence in Biliran, that's my province down south of Manila, because I'm based now in Manila. It's in the Visayas group of islands. It's actually roughly the size of Singapore, about 600 plus square kilometers.
Right.
Poverty incidence in Biliran when I started was at a whooping 65%. That's roughly 7 out. That's roughly 7 out of 10 people from Biliran are poor. So we're poor, and we were actually on the top 10 of the poorest provinces in the Philippines. But through a combination of interventions in education, health, and public infrastructure, which I always consider as the 3 key pillars to a strong local economy, we were able to, when I exited from the political scene in Biliran in 2010, that's a short 3 years only, sir. That's only 3 years. Poverty incidence in Biliran dropped to under 30%. So from a high of 65% in 2007, through a combination of education, health, and infrastructure projects and interventions, we were able to reduce poverty incidence by more than 1/2 to under 30%. Or that means only less than 3 out of 10 people in Biliran were poor by the time I exited from politics or from the political scene in Biliran. And I had really wanted to build a strong local economy as a foundation for improving the lives of my people. And it was also my way of actually creating a sort of political revolution wherein people will see that our island has progressed under my leadership, and other people from other neighboring political jurisdictions will start asking questions why we are progressive and they are not. And the answer is simple. They have chosen the right leader. So that is actually the political revolution I wanted to create by setting an example in Biliran, because all the surrounding political jurisdictions were controlled by long-standing political families, and so many people are really poor in that part of the Visayas. But in 2010, unfortunately, this Smartmatic was able to control our elections with the connivance of our Commission on Elections, and I lost by only 361 votes. I lost not on the day of the elections, but the day after the elections, with the last ballot cast noontime of the next day. So meaning to say the people were still voting all throughout the night and into the early morning hours and into the afternoon of the next day. So that means our elections run for almost 29 hours. And that's unbelievable. So since I lost only by 361 votes, the people came out. They protested for three straight days. It was the biggest political rally. I mean, riots were there in Biliran. But ultimately, I told them to go home. We have to fight this in another forum. So that's when I started to find out, because the people were able to obtain documents from the machines. Actually, it was the people who forced the election officers to hand over to them certified true copies of documents from the machines. And so when these were turned over to us, we studied them carefully. I studied them actually for the first 6 months of 2010. I mean, the second 6 months of 2010 after I lost. And we were able to find out, for example, there were 7 precincts who were transmitting more than once. There were even more than twice or 3 times more. Multiple transmission of results. So these are kind of suspicious because there should only be 1 transmission of results. So the subsequent transmissions were made only at times when the machines were already repacked into their boxes. So you see that the machine first transmitted when they were still in place in the polling precincts. Then there were subsequent transmissions for the same precinct when the machines were already repacked. They were already inside the boxes and ready for redeployment back to the hubs, to the warehouses. So the big question is who made those subsequent transmissions. Aside from that, we were also able to identify 4,114 ballots, which were already read by 145 voting machines. So 4,114 ballots were already read by 145 voting machines days before the actual elections. And these can be actually proven. This can actually be proven by looking at the certified true copies of the audit logs of each of these 145 machines. So I presented them in subsequent hearings in the Senate before the Commission on Elections and the Smartmatic. They have failed or they have refused to answer these documents. They could not answer these documents because they could not question the authenticity of the documents because they are certified true copy. It's as if they were originals, churned out by the machines. So since they could not impugn the documents, they just instead refused to answer. And they refused to answer those questions for the last 9 years. So I kept fighting, unknown to my fellow countrymen. They did not know that there was this guy, Attorney Glenn Chong, who was continually fighting for them for the last 9 years. Why did they not know? Because mainstream media in the Philippines, I boldly accuse them, that is the newspapers, radio, and TV networks, they're being bribed by Smartmatic. Not so much with the reporters, but the news editors. The reporters may report them, but when they reach the news desk, the articles, the news about election cheating is killed, quote unquote. So nothing comes out, even if I have already been divulging to them. Like, for example, in 2013, we were able to discover that the strange, we call it digital lines, appear in the ballot images of the physical ballot. Because when the ballot is inserted, the machine takes a picture of the physical ballot, and we call it ballot images. We discovered that there were strange lines, which we call digital lines, which if they pass through the ovals of the candidates, the machine will vote and read them as votes, even if the voter did not actually shade the ovals. So I repeat, even if the ovals were not shaded, for as long as the mysterious digital line traverses over the oval, the machine will vote automatically for that candidate. And if the machine keeps on adding votes and the total votes cast for any particular position exceeds the maximum allowable limit, like for senators, if you shaded 11 and the machine added 3, then that makes it 14, but the maximum is 12. So the the entire votes for senators, all the votes for senators are nullified. So it results actually in automated additions and automated deductions. So I showed it to the Senate, particularly Precinct 193 in Barangay Talima, Lapu-Lapu City, in which 25% of the votes cast for the precincts were wrongly counted, either added or subtracted. So there were many other things, sir, that I was able to prove before the Senate. As a matter of fact, I got one confession from the Commission on Elections that in my case in Biliran in 2010, the Commission on Elections in an executive session, it's a closed-door session of Congress, of the Senate of the Philippines, they admitted that only fraud can explain that case of Glenn Chong. They admitted that, sir, only fraud can explain the case of Glenn Chong in Biliran. So then in 2016, this is the more brazen manipulation of the automated election system. Actually, sir, the case of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., that's Bongbong Marcos, exactly is a mirror of my case way back in 2010.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
During the night of the canvassing, I was ahead in the race. I was ahead of my opponent by roughly 2% of the votes cast. Bongbong Marcos, during the evening of the election, during the night of the elections, when we were canvassing the votes, was also ahead of his closest rival by 2% of the votes cast. Then, I was overtaken at 4:46 in the morning of the next day. Bongbong Marcos was overtaken at 3:06 in the morning of the next day. Then when you look at the final loss for myself at 361 votes, that's equivalent to 0.5% of the votes cast. If you look at Bongbong Marcos' loss, marginal loss, the margin or the loss, he also lost by exactly 0.5%. So you see, there are three important factors that coincide exactly as what happened to me and to Bongbong Marcos. The only difference is that my case occurred 6 years earlier. Bongbong Marcos' case occurred 6 years later. But it's exactly the same conditions as you look at the results of the voting and balloting. Now, finally, I was able to make a headway, and this was really a big headway in the Philippines, in our fight on July 31, 2018, just last year, a few months ago. I testified before the Senate of the Philippines that there were 459 precincts, polling precincts across the Philippines, which were already transmitting results one day before the elections. Even before any ballot, any single ballot was ever cast anywhere in the Philippines, these 459 precincts, approximately consisting of 220,000 votes, were already transmitting results one day before the elections. So that was the biggest expose that I was able to bring out to the public. And a lot of people came to realize that Smartmatic had indeed been actually controlling our elections and cheating them and selling them to the highest bidder. So that's what happened. And the Commission on Elections and Smartmatic were flabbergasted. They could not speak a word when I showed the evidence before them on screen. There was a projector in the committee room, in the hearing room, and I showed the evidence of transmissions, 459 transmissions across the country one day before the elections. So, among other things that I showed, of course, the Commission on Elections and Smartmatic could not answer them. So, everybody, it was everybody for everybody to see. The whole world was watching at the Commission on Elections and Smartmatic, and they could not answer. So it took them a while to get their bearings back. So, but of course, it was already very obvious that they were merely concocting stories. They were merely concocting excuses. So that was July 31, 2018, sir. And finally, I have been fighting for a long 9 years. I have already come to a point that I've decided to end this advocacy because it's no longer practical for me. I have already given up 9 years of my life, productive life that I could have used to increase my own family wealth. My brother, my sister don't talk to me anymore because they're angry at me why I'm spending the family fortune on a stupid gamble. That's what they call it. But I kept my faith in the Filipino. But ultimately, after 9 long years, I've decided actually to call it quits. But then I have a problem. If I will just suddenly stop, I was afraid of the insinuations of Smartmatic. I'm sure I know these guys. I've been fighting them up front and personal for the last 9 years. I know them. They would take every opportunity to destroy me, to destroy my credibility, to destroy my name and reputation. So I was afraid that if I would just simply suddenly stop, they will insinuate that they had already bought me. So if I would just simply suddenly stop, then I would have given credits to their insinuation that they had already bought me. So that I cannot agree, I cannot accept. So I finally decided I have to file my certificate of candidacy, if only to bring the message for one last time to the people. For one last time to the people. And this is it. This is it. The one last time that I'm giving up to the people this message, that our elections have been stolen, being sold and traded like it's a cheap commodity, when our votes are supposed to be sacred. It epitomizes our future, our hopes as a people. And here you are, they are selling it like a cheap commodity. And that only one person has really stood up against them, valiantly fighting and risking his life and reputation. So I filed. Actually, sir, hello?
Yes.
I was praying to God where I will go. If I will file for senator or if I will file for party list representative. In a party list representative, I would need only about 500,000 votes. I could win. I could easily win that. But if it's senator, I would need at least 30 million votes. So that would be very, very impossible. So I kept praying to God, and I didn't file my certificate of candidacy for senator because I was really gunning for party list, because both have nationwide scope. So whether I run for senator, I could still bring my message across the country, in as much as I could do the same in a party list as a party list representative. But if I were to run simply in my district like before, then I will be confined only to 600 square kilometers of space. So my message could not get across to the country. So what I did was prepare for 3 party lists, sir. And whether you will believe me or not, all those options were lost one after the other. And I actually spectacularly lost all those options. But the one for senator was the only option left. A friend of mine, she filed for senator, and she held that filing for a long time. And fortunately, she was not disqualified, although she was a nuisance candidate for all intents and purposes. For all intents and purposes, she was a nuisance candidate. She could have been disqualified, and I could not replace her. But divine providence, perhaps, allowed it. She was not disqualified. I was able to legally replace her, substitute her. And so that was a Monday, November 26, 2018. November 26, 2018. I was with my personal aide, my longtime personal aide for more than almost 12 years. His name is Richard Santillan. Richard Red. His nickname is Red Santillan. He served me so faithfully, sir, for the last 12 years. So faithfully that when I was defeated in 2010, he was offered by my opponent a huge sum of money. He could choose whatever government contracts he wants, and they would give it to him if he would just transfer to them. But you know what? Richard never left me. Richard never accepted the bribe. He stuck with me even if his salary was just a meager, I think I remember his salary was only 10,000 pesos in 2010 all the way until 2015. He never asked for a salary adjustment because he knew I was in dire straits. But he faithfully served me until the day he died on December 10, 2018. As I've said, sir, I filed my certificate of candidacy by substitution on November 26. It was a Monday. Richard was with me. He was always by my side or behind me. was always by my side or behind me. And when we're together, I would really call him Kuya or elder brother, because he was really older than me by a year and a half. And I had grown accustomed to him. He actually handles my wallet. He actually takes money out of ATMs. For me, he knows my PIN number. I don't even know my personal identification number. He memorizes it. He gets money. He deposits money for me. That's how much I trusted the guy. And I was really dependent on him in many ways. And just one Monday passed by. The next Monday, that's when I knew Richard was killed. He was actually abducted by rogue police officers.
Yeah.
He was actually abducted by rogue police officers. He was brought to a safe house where he was tortured. According to the latest report of the Public Attorney's Office Forensic Examination Team, he sustained 70 wounds all over his body. 70 wounds all over his body. But only 33 of those wounds could be accounted for by bullet wounds. According to the version of the police, he shot it out with the police after he was flagged down. He refused to stop, and he shot it out with the police until he was killed. In a shootout, they call it a legitimate encounter. But how can you consider that a legitimate encounter when Richard sustained 70 wounds and only 33 of those wounds can be accounted for by bullet entry and exit wounds? There were 37 other wounds that were like a hematoma to the back of the head. There were 3 hematomas there. Hematoma to the side, to the left side of the abdomen, or the front right side of the abdomen. And then there were puncture marks at the back, 6 puncture marks, which looks like they were stabbed by an ice pick. There were lacerations just above the buttocks. There were 3 that I noted. And I believe that his toenails, the 5th digit and the 4th digit, were also shot at close range. Yeah. So it was really very painful for me because I lost my brother in every real sense of the word, sir. I lost my brother in a very brutal way. And originally, I thought that this was just a intended for me to withdraw my candidacy. It was intended for me to strike fear in my heart. That was actually the first version. This is actually the first version that I have considered. They killed Richard in that way because they wanted to warn me in a way that will force me to withdraw my certificate of candidacy for senator, because the syndicate was thinking that if I will win, by some sheer luck, I will win, I would order a senator, I would have political power in my hands, I would order the opening of ballot boxes and recount the votes, and that's when they could be discovered spectacularly. So they're afraid that their contracts around the world will be rescinded if they were discovered to have manipulated the elections in the Philippines. They cannot afford that. But on the other hand, if I will lose, they are also thinking that I will file an election protest and nevertheless have the ballots opened and recounted. So it would be a big headache for them. So in other words, for Smartmatic, whether I win or I lose, it's a big headache for them. So that's why they have to find a way, they have to devise a way to force me to withdraw. And Richard's death was one of such instances that could force me to withdraw. In fact, I was already thinking, right after I knew of Richard's death, 29 hours later, the first thing that came to my mind was to withdraw. Yeah. But then I passed by the funeral home where he was kept. From the original place, he was brought to another funeral home. From the original funeral home, he was brought to another funeral home. I passed by that home because it was only less than a kilometer away from my condominium complex. So I saw his body. I saw his wounds all over the body. I put my hands over his breast and vowed to him, this is going to be a very, very hard and uphill battle. But for our country and for him, and for God's glory, I'll keep fighting until the end. I'll keep fighting until the end, sir. So if at first I was just simply looking for a way out, originally when I filed my certificate of candidacy, I was just simply looking for a way out. That if people will listen to my message, fine, I will serve them. The way I did serve my people in Biliran, But if they will not listen to me, and then I'm free to turn my back on this country and never go back because they didn't listen to my message. But this time, with the blood and life of Richard in the hands of this syndicate called Smartmatic and their cohorts, with the blood in their hands, and I know that Richard was innocent. He suffered a brutal death that is unforgivable to me. That's why I'm no longer running for a loss, but for an absolute win. Because this is the only way we can really stop Smartmatic, kick them out for good, expose them for what they are, and give justice to Richard Santillan for a very brutal death he suffered in their hands. So, I'm actually, sir, my mind is split between seeking justice for Richard at this time, at the same time, waging a campaign that does not accept defeat, because there is no way out for us, the people of this country. So it's a difficult situation that I'm in. That's why I told you a while ago before we started. I'm awake 20 hours a day. I sleep only 4 hours. There were even times that the other day I slept only for 2 hours. Then last night only 4 hours. So, but surprisingly, I'm still up and about. If this is a gift from God, I'm very grateful. But who else would have given me this gift if not God? So here I am, fighting two battlefronts in which defeat is never an option for any of these battlefronts. So, but I know, sir, that these criminal Smartmatic and the police officers who did this to Richard would have already seen that they have committed the gravest error they can ever commit. They not only have bloods in their hands, but they stand actually at the cusp of being kicked out of this country if the people will rise up against them and speak in a manner that they cannot cheat anymore. And that's what I'm gunning for, sir. That the people will rise up, be united together, vote as one. Because I know, sir, that if I get to be the front runner of this race for senator, I know Smartmatic will drop all cheating these elections because they're afraid. I will order the opening of the ballot boxes. If I will order the opening of the ballot boxes and their cheating is exposed, then they will lose all contracts around the world. They will no longer have any credibility at the same time. And on the other hand, I will gain all credibility because I was able to prove that there wasn't any cheating by this evil we actually called smart magic. But on the other hand, sir, if they will not cheat, they will drop the cheating all the way down to local councilors. And if I order the opening of the ballots and find nothing, then it will add to the credibility of Smartmatic and at the same time destroy me. So if I become front runner in these elections, we still have enough time. If I rise to the top to a point that they cannot anymore cheat me, just like what happened to President Digong, then I think that the practical and fair solution for Smartmatic would be to withdraw the cheating in all levels in these elections. And that's what I'm telling all political candidates. You have to help me. You have to campaign for me because I can provide you with the protection that you will not be cheated because they're so afraid of me. On September 18, 2014, they did try to offer me. They tried to bribe me. Someone from the Commission on Elections, Election Commission's Advisory Council came up to me and told me, if you only talk to us, then you would have no more problem in Biliran. My understanding is, if I will talk to them, we come to an agreement, they will make me win. But I flatly refused the offer. And told them that I live by the principles in life that I hold so dearly and it's not for sale. I will not sell out my country. I will not sell out my people. I'll just keep fighting for as long as I can. So that's pretty well the background of my fight against this evil Smartmatic and election cheating in general, sir.
Well, I have told people since I've become involved with your campaign, I have told people that you are the only future of the Philippines.
Sir?
Because the oligarchs, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can hear you now.
Okay. I have been telling people that you are the linchpin to save the country, because if you are elected, you will bring the process of legitimate sovereign self-representation for Maharlika. Notice the topic, Philippines needs to disappear. We need to instill Maharlika as a nation, because you are not slaves. Filipinos are not slaves. You are
Yes,
not
sir.
housemaids. You come from a multi-thousand-year culture. Okay. Now, my goal is to bring awareness to kababayan, to DDS, BBM, and OFW worldwide. When you elect Tete Digong, you all elected yourself as a citizen. You open your heart, open your mind and your eyes. Your Imperial Manila has created a divide between the North and the South for over 100 years that basically creates a closed brain Western mentality, where you will have the common Filipino being gago even to themselves, you see. So what I want to do is bring a thinking process back to reasoning on the law, reasoning on the reason why there have been so many years of pork barrels, so many years of usury, narco-political, so many years of human trafficking. It is because your country, kababayan, your country, Maharlika, when you are free, then the Western control of Manila will disappear and the Malacanang Palace will just become a building. Tete Tigong is moving to federalism to bring autonomy to all of the archipelagos of Maharlika. But you are moving to bring a conscious awareness to life itself. You cannot live your life as a slave, ignorant of your own freedom, because most Filipinos did not even realize they were slaves until Tete Tigong ran for office. You see? Every time Cory Aquino, Nanoy Aquino, this and this and this, you can buy a vote with 500 peso and a Starbucks coffee. Now you have the ignorance of the children in UP, in Manila, dismembering the image of Tete Digong when they should be embracing that rule of law is human value. But we must address the sin of each one of us. We have allowed these oligarchs, we have allowed the central banks, we have allowed our own ignorance to make blood on our hands. My heart is that your election, your story, the process of bringing change will show the honor and integrity of